take the old stuff out
I
at the
don't
same time.
see.
So it
Oh,
becomes,
is there a way to lower our mics a little?
where it all turns out, though.
Oh, good.
We'll
Thank
see.
you. Raghunandan is here, and Kristen Vincent. Our new student representative, Aratrika Ghosh, is with us tonight. Recording secretary, Jen Benton. We have staff from Westborough TV here, and I'd like to personally welcome everyone sitting in front of us and those watching from home. Our agenda for this evening is as follows. We'll begin with an approval of minutes from June 8th, 2022 regular session meeting, then hear from Amber Bach with the superintendent's report, followed by the assistant superintendent's report, then the director of finance and administration's report, then we'll have you up with the school committee member reports, followed by the building project updates. We'll then hear from some citizens during citizens' requests. Then we'll receive a hiring update. Soon thereafter, we'll hear about a verbal update on enrollment. We'll then move on to the facilities summer projects update, followed by a financial update. Then we'll continue with a busing update, followed by an acknowledgement and potential acceptance of donations to the Borough program. Then we'll enter into an executive session by vote and finally adjourn for this evening. So let's begin with an approval of minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve minutes from June 8th, 2022 regular session?
So move.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I see a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed, 4 being present. And now we'll turn it over to Amber for the superintendent's report.
Right, thank you very much. It is good to officially see all of you for our opening meeting. This really is our official beginning of the school year. We always have a school committee meeting the Monday before the start of school on the eve of Wednesday. On the eve of Tuesday, we're ready and we greet kids on Wednesday. So the goal of tonight is really, it gives us a chance to kind of renew our focus, brush off the rust of our meeting skills, and get ready to go for the year ahead. There's not too much heavy lifting tonight. There's a lot of good updates. We have a school committee meeting scheduled for the 7th next week, where we'll go back in depth on other topics and more into the meat of the types of approvals and different things that we need to accomplish this year. The core purpose of tonight is to be able to give you benchmarking updates on things that happened across the span of the summer and make sure that coming into the start of school that we have everything in place. So I will start with my update, giving an overview that, of course, today we had the welcome back of all faculty, and I'm going to leave it to Daniel to provide highlights on how that went. It was a pleasure to welcome many of you to join us as well for that. We also, on Thursday and Friday last week, had 2 working days with new faculty, which went really well. And again, Daniel, I think, as the person who organizes those 2 days, has some highlights of how that went. It was certainly really an enjoyable part of gearing up for the start. On Wednesday, we will greet all students and families back to the year. I think that as of now, I would say that we are ready for a very smooth opening. Fall sports teams have all completed, I think, trying out. I believe we're all done. I got a late update today on one of the other teams being up and running. Practices are going well. We have welcomed back events that are almost complete. I know tonight Armstrong at 5 o'clock was doing their popsicles on the blacktop and up on the green. Custodial and maintenance teams have done an incredibly good job to be really ahead of schedule this year, which is quite a feat given that our buildings are really used year round. We have summer programming in coordination with some of our own summer programming and supports of students who require additional learning throughout the summer, as well as recreation, working with us collaboratively, and then community ed, both of whom rent space. So they're off kind of doing their thing, but it keeps all of our buildings really busy. And so I think the custodial team has really learned the magic of working around them, and all of our buildings were looking really good. I start building walk downs like beginning of last week, where I really do kind of a room by room walk through and take a look at how we stand for opening. It takes me the week just to kind of like do one a day and to be able to make a list with principals, check on how things are doing, make sure we feel really ready to begin. So then you have then the polish that happens in the last couple of days, making sure we don't have any dead plants in buckets by the front of the door. Things like that you walk in on the first day of school and you realize you forgot to like mention. The details matter, and so those last couple of days allow us to come back in and make sure that we're really looking ready to welcome everybody back. I do want to give a shout out to the custodial maintenance teams. They work tirelessly. They're a very active team, and they just do a tremendous job to do a massive amount of painting and room moving and coordination. They do really incredible work. When I get to the summer projects work, I'll give you some highlights of the more substantial projects that they accomplish, but then there's just their annual work, which is also pretty impressive. Tomorrow, I will be sending a note to, again, a last reminders to family that we look forward to welcoming them on Wednesday, and ask them to make sure that they go ahead and check their bus routes and types of things. I know Lisa's going to do a bus update, so I will leave that to her, but our bus route corrections across the span of the last 2 weeks have been going very, very smoothly. People have done a nice job to reach out to Cindy Crowley, our transportation coordinator, and I know Lisa will give other details. I will be sending a note tomorrow just to say that we look forward to seeing everybody and pushing out 1 or 2 of the remaining COVID practices that are in place that were still in place at the close of last year. The significant pieces of those really remain that if you get COVID, you need the 5-day window of isolation, and then you can return with a mask. So that's a protocol where we ended at the close of the year, and we will still have that in place for faculty, staff, and students. And so I'll be just pushing out a reminder on that to people. And then we aren't doing any on-site testing in terms of like, we're not running kits, but nurses will have some kits to check if there's a question, or they can call, parents can call the Board of Health or ask us for a kit if we have some, and while they're remaining, we're willing to share them home and let somebody check if they feel like they have a question if one of their children might be COVID positive. So those are the reminders that I'll be pushing out tomorrow along with the welcome, and we should be ready to go on Wednesday. So I have other important updates to give you as we move, but I just want to say it feels really good to be back in swing with people really gearing up. Faculty are very energized for the start of the year, and it's going to be a good one. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Daniel?
Good evening. Nice to see you all. We had a great opening day today for the faculty. I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I also just want to mention I had the orientation for new staff last week, Thursday and Friday. I know Tam is going to give a detailed update on hiring over the summer, but I will tell you that those 2 days that we spent with the new staff, it's always a pleasure to get to know people by themselves before they're mixed in with everybody else, to get a sense of who they are and what they're bringing to the district. And they all meet up with the teachers, each get a mentor. It doesn't matter whether you're an experienced teacher or not. We have a philosophy that you're better off having somebody that's a go-to person who can support you. And so during those 2 days, some of it's spending time with mentors, and much of it's spending some time with me and going through some nuts and bolts stuff about the district, as well as a lot of work understanding our guiding principles and philosophy and curriculum, and getting to know those pieces. Of the over 50 faculty that I was working with that are new to the district, over 30 of them are coming from other districts, and so they're experienced. In fact, 17 of those have taught for over 6 years in other districts. So it's a diverse and interesting group. And then this morning, we started the day with the welcome in the auditorium for all staff, sorry. And I know several of you were there, and you have your opinions on it, but it was a very upbeat welcome. We did something a little unusual in having some guests come in. Traditionally, Amber and I will do a talk of some sort about, that try to inspire them for the year, but we decided this year we were going to go with it.
We needed a booster. We brought in
We needed a booster. We wanted to make it. We wanted to amp up the cuteness element. Yes. So we brought in about 10 of our students, and we had them think about before they came in what they were excited about coming back to school for the year. And several of the 10 students were quite young, and so it was interesting to watch their stage fright
or their stage skill. I'm kind of mystified that they just marched out in front of 600 teachers.
It was an interesting mix. They were a little of both. Some of them came out, grabbed the mic, and they were fine. And then there was one of the kiddos who got out there, and he just froze. But then all he needed was one prompt. And then he started saying what he was so excited about. But that part of it was very sweet, and the faculty loved seeing the kids. And we had students ranging up to seniors in high school, from preschool kids to high school. And then there was a second part in terms of the guests. We had Kevin Guest. Guest is his last name, who's a former student from the Westborough Public Schools. And we had discovered him in the spring that he had this talented, he's working as a professional singer, and in a casual conversation we learned that he was inspired by his time in Westborough to become a professional singer. And so he has this a cappella group that he sings with, and we invited Kevin to come in and talk a little bit about the Westborough Public Schools and the influence on his life, and then also have his group come with them, and that was not, made known to the audience in advance. And so Kevin, after quite emotional, it was sweet to watch him. He was just very happy to be back and talking about his experience in Westborough Public Schools and people that influenced him. But he then introduced his singing group, and they did 4 or 5 really lovely numbers, and people were dancing and clapping and smiling, and there was a lot of warm feelings, and people were very appreciative for that. And that whole thing took about an hour. It's not a very long ceremony, but people left in good moods, and then they go off into different department level meetings during the day, and they go into have their building level meetings, and there was just a lot of just sort of people getting the lay of the land today. And then tomorrow's prepping in classrooms without the students, and getting ready for Wednesday, where we'll be ready to greet the students. That's my update.
Thank you very much. Dave, do you have anything for this evening?
Just a couple quick updates, actually. I just wanted to give a shout out to the business office as well, in terms of, I think they did a really good job this summer of finding kind of balance with some vacation time, but work and prioritizing and making sure that the school year ended appropriately, but at the same time we were there in support of our schools as they opened, and transitioned into purchasing new things and supplies and materials for this current year. So I wanted to give the business office a big shout out for that. I do have a couple other things, but I think in an effort to save my voice, I think some of the school committee members might help me, as well as Superintendent Bach, so I will chime in when it's appropriate.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to school committee member reports, and we're going to begin with our student liaison, Aratrika Ghosh.
So I have a pretty brief and more general update, but at the high school, the senior tie-dye yesterday was well attended, and I can vouch. I went there, and students are really excited to march come the first day of school. The Westborough High School Student Council also had a successful retreat at the high school filled with team building events that went really smoothly. The freshman year orientation was also a good event, and students were able to meet with their counselors, join clubs at the club fair, as well as toured the school as it pertained to their schedule. Mr. Callahan is confident and believes that staff and students are ready to transition into the new school year. For Hastings, Mrs. Tagata provided the following update. She said, at Hastings, we are excited for a fresh start and a new school year. Staff, students, and families are energetic and enthusiastic for the year ahead. We have started to welcome students back informally with story hours, popsicle meet and greets, open door day, and more. Teachers have been busy in their spaces preparing for the beginning of the year, and we are looking forward to our first official day with students soon. At Fails, they also had open door days where students and parents were able to drop off their school supplies as well as tour their classrooms. Events such as Picture Day and Open House are also scheduled for later in September. At Gibbons, they had a successful open door days. There's a lot of open door days in this update on the 23rd and 25th, where students were able to tour the schools, have lockers for the first time, and also pick up their Chromebooks. And Armstrong and Mill Pond had no updates for this meeting, but we hope to hear from them come our September 7th meeting. I saved my favorite update for last. National Honor Society at Westborough High School has recorded approximately 600 hours of service just this summer, and the chapter looks forward to another great year of service for our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to let Steve get settled. I thought he was locked out. That's why I left for a moment. But he is here, and the door was opened. So Kristen will go off. We'll come back to Steve.
Sure. I'm going to give my annual reminder about now that school's in session, there will be increased traffic around town. So you'll notice a lot more cars on the road coming into the Rotary for the morning and early afternoons. Also, there'll be lots of children and students walking. We're very lucky that we have several downtown schools, and that means that lots of people can walk to school, but that means lots of people on the sidewalks and crossing the main roads. So please be aware that kids will be crossing the streets. And if you see a school bus, please let them go. Please yield to a school bus, especially if they're crossing the middle of town. That means they're trying to get from Gibbons to the high school or high school to Gibbons, and they have a whole other bus run to do after that. So if you happen to be there and you see a bus, just give a nice wave and let them go, and they will appreciate it, and their parents and students will appreciate it too. So that's my annual reminder.
Okay.
Thanks.
Steve, did you want to join at this time, or?
Sure, I have no formal updates, but I do have an expression of gratitude. This is, days like today are when people who have spent their lives in education return to work, and it's always such an anxiety-ridden time, but it's also a moment when we get to reflect on the beginning of a new year. And really, I just want to start this year off by expressing the sort of gratitude that I have for all of the people who are in education and doing the kind of work that educators do in caring for kids and helping kids feel safe these days, and building community in an everyday way. And we sometimes, it's very easy to reflect at the end of a school year. I just want to sort of reflect at the start of the school year as well by just expressing gratitude as we begin this whole new adventure. COVID's going to be with us forever, but I think we'll be able to build upon the strengths and lessons of last year and really move forward in positive ways. So thank you.
Thank you. Raghu, do you have anything this evening?
Yeah, I have one update. Over the summer, we applied for a grant for electric buses. We applied for 4 buses for the school district. It's not guaranteed. It's for a grant of $250,000 each. The bus cost is $300,000. So there's a $50,000 difference, but I'm sure it provides a great ROI because of fuel and maintenance costs. But the grant itself is non-binding. It's very competitive. It's not guaranteed that we'll get it, but if we get it, and for whatever the reason, we had to apply during the summer because the deadline was during the summer, we had to apply. We went forward and applied for it because it was non-binding. For whatever the reason, the stakeholders don't want to go forward, we can always refuse to take the grant money. Thanks to David and Peter, they put in a lot of hours of work to put in the application. My shout out to them. And it's in there. Hopefully we'll get it, and hopefully we can get 4 new electric buses working for us the coming years. That's my update.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Steve, do you want to wait till your building report?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to welcome our school committee members and people who are out there watching, and I'm just so excited to return to the 2022-23 school year. It's an honor once again to serve on the school committee. This morning's event, as mentioned, that kicked off the year with all the teachers present, served as a reminder of why we are here. The impact can be far-reaching as we witnessed this 2007 Westborough Public Schools graduate take to the stage, offering insight of how his teachers and this school district altered his life for the better. In his words, made him who he is today, his successes, his career path, and belief in himself. Bless you. Truly a remarkable moment to remind teachers of the impact they have on students, that the decisions we make as school committee members matter. The resources that provided this one young man the path to his successes made a difference. Let's keep in mind our purpose, although I know none of us takes for granted the charge for which we have been elected. These moments of pause are great to consider and remember why we chose to sit in these seats. On another note, I wanted to just remind people that there is an event called Westborough for Life, Stay, Connect, and Thrive. It's taking place on September 11th from 1 to 4 p.m. at the Westborough High School. It's a community event. It is geared towards residents 45 plus, but certainly I could see 30 plus there as well. I could see other adults there as well. It's sponsored by the Westborough Civics Club and the Women's Club. It will have an expo of many, many businesses and clubs and organizations. It will have mini courses of all different topics. There are at least 4 of them. And then there's all these, what they call fun-tivities, and pickleball and badminton and a bunch of other line dancing. And they'll be honoring September 11th there as well. There'll be music and the turquoise table. So it sounds like a very interesting event for Westborough residents. Okay, we're going to move on to building project updates. Steve?
Thank you. I'll just start by saying that the facilities department of the school district made great headway in a whole bunch of projects, and rather than try to detail them, I think at some future date we can ask them to come in and report on what they were able to get done. But a couple of the biggies, the roof at Armstrong is complete. They're cleaning up the project area and did a good job there, as well as work at Hastings on the sprinkler system got done. I think there's still some minor items to work out. And with that as the other projects, so the Vail School project is nearly complete. And I mean that most of all the physical items that are required for the school are complete. The solar panel system, the geothermal system, the building itself, with some very few minor punch list items. Outside work, however, if anybody who's driven by realizes that it was a terrible summer to try to grow grass, and the lower field is mostly weeds, and that remains to be corrected by the contractor. If you drive by, you'll see that there's a lot of sod in the areas of the playground and at the facade of the building itself. The rest of the project is complete in the sense that the paving of the upper loop, which is the bus loop is complete and striped. The lower parking lot, final paving needs to be done. And so I think you may recall we had some difficulties with the air conditioning system at Fields towards the end of the school year. That was eventually solved, and that at this point we have remaining fluids to put into the geothermal system, such as antifreeze and corrosion corrective fluids as well. That'll be done when school's not in session later in September, early October. So with that, the remaining stuff is almost all accounting, where we need to get the books straight and available relative to the MSBA and the final funding for the project. So hopefully the remaining stuff will get done, and some of those details are things that make Fields School unique among school buildings in the town that deal with the school mascot, the painting on the pavement of that stuff, and the final work on the playground as well. So I guess the last piece that anybody might be very interested in is how did we do on the budget? We still have a small amount of contingency money left, which means that we are still within the budget that the town voted, and we hope to close the project without having to ask the town for any additional money. And so with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to citizens' request. I'm just going to read my reminder. We have a policy regarding citizens' requests. Some important pieces of this policy include that you must be a current resident of Westborough. Speakers are allowed to address the school committee about issues within the school committee's purview. Westborough School District policy or budget are a couple of examples. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak to the school committee. Written comments longer than 3 minutes must be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. They may be. You are welcome to hand me additional comments in writing now or send them via email, and I will share them with the other school committee members. Public comment by residents at this meeting is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. Our role is to listen carefully to what you have to share with us tonight. Clapping, cheering, calling out, or any other noise following a speaker is not allowed. A reminder that if not following the policy, this may cut into your time. Additionally, I want to remind members of the school committee that when making a point of order, please address your concern to the chair initially rather than to the speaker. The chair has the right to have participants register in advance so that session time limits can be applied and so that participants can be called upon in an orderly manner. I may limit the maximum minutes for citizens' requests to 15 minutes should I see fit. Is there anyone here tonight that wishes to make a statement to the school committee? Come right forward and state your name and your street address and speak into the microphone. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm speaking to Mr. Conklin. There's no one else with their hand up, but you could not see that. Sorry about that.
Boyd Conklin, 8 Water Street. So once again, I'd like to talk about the COVID gene therapy, also known as COVID vaccines, that the school committee and Westborough Public Schools have a propensity to push on the students and community in order to comply with federal and state funding grants such as CARES, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and ESSER, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. According to official statistics, excess mortality in many highly vaccinated countries is 15 to 20% above historical norms since the gene therapy vaccine started. In the United States, that would be 7,900 people per week and rising since the vaccines began. Manitoba, Canada, in May 2022, vaccinated but unboosted were about 50% more likely to be hospitalized or die of COVID than unvaccinated people. These figures and estimates differ markedly from those of the Centers for Disease Control that have been provided by the Centers for Disease Control for American COVID deaths, but they are likely to be far more accurate. American hospitals and health authorities classify COVID deaths and hospitalizations as occurring in the unvaccinated until proven otherwise. So this 15% excess mortality could be, if your usual age of death is 80 years, that reduces the lifespan to 68 years or 12 years. And then another topic on the electric buses that Raghu was talking about, you should take a look at some of the electric buses blowing up with those lithium batteries, and then you park them all together, and then the whole lot goes up, but it's very hard for the students to escape one of them if it blows. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being there on the school committee.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to move on. Is there anyone else who is here for a citizen's request? Okay. Seeing none, we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the hiring update. I think we're going to hear from Tammy Costello. Our
So yeah, we're welcoming Tammy Costello as she gets up here and gets settled. She really will speak to a summary of the hiring season. I think that it always is surprising to people how incredibly busy we are in school districts with a rotational maintenance of staffing. And Tammy's report gives you a snapshot of our annual work, and I think it kind of gives an opportunity just for citizens to see that. It certainly was a very robust hiring season in terms of, you've seen the notations on how competitive the hiring prospects were. A lot of districts struggled to fill positions. We did very, very well. I just want to give a shout out to the admin team, the hiring committees, to HR and the groups who really represented Westborough well on the ground, and we were able to find really high quality people. So I'm going to turn it over to Tam and let her share with you.
Before you proceed, can I have a quick question? Is 50 normal number, above normal, below normal?
I would say after you look at the composite of the report, it's about typical for us. It's a little bit less than last year, actually. Yeah.
Hello. I feel like I just left here in June since I was at the last meeting. It was the fastest summer in the history of summers. We've been very busy, as have many school districts, but we've also been very successful, so that is exciting. So we started off the summer with our summer program. So while we were offboarding many employees that had retired and some that had resigned, we were onboarding for our summer programs. And we had 3 major programs. We had our ESL Summer School, which served 75 of our students with English as a second language. The Gibbons Middle School had 31 students for the summer program they do, and the summer camp that our community education program puts on serviced 486 students. We also hire what we call summer tech rangers, which are mostly high school students who are getting their first job working for our technology department, and they help John Green and the technology department get all of the computers up and running and all the technology needed for the new school year. So all in all, we had 64 staff members that we hired for the summer programs. About half of that is existing staff, and the other half was brand new people that we onboarded, and then we offboarded all 64 of them. Well, half of them, because some of them are staying. We hired 6 administrators since late spring. We hired our new director of English language education, Letitia Broomfield, who was one of our EL teachers that was promoted to director. We had a very robust assistant principal hiring summer. We hired Kate Mercadante for the high school. We hired Maureen Stewart for Gibbons Middle School. And late in the spring, we hired Kristen Robertson for Mill Pond. She used to be our social studies elementary curriculum coordinator, and she was promoted to the assistant principal. We also hired a new special education coordinator for the high school, Seth Hurwitz, and we hired Maura Kowaleski, who was the assistant principal at Mill Pond, as our crisis intervention coordinator. It's important to note that you're going to hear me say a lot of hired. Every single position that we hired was a replacement for another, with the exception of 2. So when you see these numbers, know that the vast majority are one-to-one replacements. Professional staff, that's how my brain thinks, professional staff and non-professional. We had 42, we had 39 up until about 48 hours ago. Now we jumped up to 42. We've had some late hires. We had 40 teachers that we hired and 2 school nurses that fall under Unit A. And then you can see the breakdown there.
Advance the slide.
Oh, sorry, it would help if I did that. Sorry.
I'm here for you, Tam. I'm
I'm changing it here. So this is just a breakdown here. You can see, obviously, high school and Mill Pond have higher numbers, but this just gives you a breakdown of the hires that we had. We also hired 32 paraeducators and tutors. The exact breakdown, we had 19 special education paraeducators, 2 math tutors, 1 technology paraeducator, and to date, 10 noon aides, but we're still hiring. Noon aides, we're hiring a couple more paraeducators. And on top of that, we had 14 long-term substitutes and support staff. This was just my way of clumping a group of other hires together. We have 4 long-term substitute teachers for maternity leave coverage that's starting right at the beginning of the school year, 3 for the high school, 1 at Armstrong. We've hired 7 community education staff for our extended day programs. We've hired 2 custodians and 1 food service employee. The summer in aggregate, we've hired 94 school year staff and 64 summer program staff, and we've hired and onboarded all of those to date. Huge shout out to HR, Bernadette Noel, my coordinator, payroll, data, technology. Those are all the departments that are heavily involved in bringing all these people on and getting them ready to be paid on September 8th, the first paycheck. So it has been a very, very successful summer, I would say. It's been a very busy summer. We do have some remaining positions open, as do other districts, but we're looking really good at this point, I would say. We have 2 open teacher positions. One's about to be hired. We have a OT at Mill Pond, and we have a special educator at the high school. We have 2 long-term substitutes. We're still looking for a psychologist at the high school and a media specialist at Fales. And we have a couple of paraeducator positions and a couple of noon aides and 2 coaching positions, but we have time for those. We also have, over the summer, I rehired or rebrought back 68 returning substitutes. I will bring on hopefully another 20 in September and October, but right now the focus is on permanent staff. And keeping with the district strategic plan, we were very successful in equity hiring. We hired diverse staff. We hired 21% of Unit A hires came from a diverse background, and 43% of our paraeducators. And lastly, this picture has nothing to do with hiring, but this is Cape Cod, where I spent a lot of my summer, and it's my happy place, and it's where I often go to in my mind when I'm not there. And that's it for the staffing update. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, what does the total number of employees today, based on your hires, how does that compare with what we had at the end of school last year?
It would be exactly the same plus 2, because we've added 2 employees. One's being paid out of a grant, and then 1 that was approved by the school committee. So 2 higher than that. Later in the year, in May, I'll do a full synopsis again of what HR did for the year, but also it'll include the FTE update. But it's really, really been one for one. In fact, we've been really meticulous about how we track when we hire someone. There's a position code, and we track who whom that person is replacing. So it's been pretty straightforward one-to-one.
Amber made a comment this morning, and I think she repeated it tonight in regards to the experience of the teachers that were hired. Can you speak to that in terms of, I know there has been public discussion about teachers leaving the profession, and in fact, there may be issues of not being able to find teachers to teach.
I mean, I was really pleased with the applicant pools that we received. I was really, probably drove a lot of the principals crazy asking about hiring committees, and I was on several hiring committees. I feel that we got really good applicants for the most part. And we did get quite a number of teachers. I'm just looking at the year's experience here, which I have. But we also we have about 9 new teachers that it's their first year. Of the 40 teachers, 9's their first year. And I find that to be very exciting, that some teachers are starting their career here, but the rest have had experience. So I did find it to be a really good blend. I also spoke to other HR directors in other districts to see how they were doing. When we were having a hard time hiring 1 or 2, I'd say, hey, do you have any applicants? And so there was a lot of collaborating with other area districts just to see if we could get some people in here. But for the most part, I think we did really well. It was definitely a race to the photo finish. I would say that 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was a lot more panicked than I am now. So I think we're looking good. I think we had some late hires, so we're scrambling to just get them onboarded, but they've officially been hired, so that's a good thing.
Just to complement that, a couple things. One is that we had a trajectory of transition of several people head off to leadership positions, somebody that took a principalship, a couple assistant principalships, somebody went and became a curriculum coordinator. So some of our team, they're very skilled and they grew to a place where they wanted more experiences. So I would say probably 6 of the transitions were towards curriculum coordinators or leadership positions. We probably had 5 or 6 transitions in the mix there that were people heading to different jobs that were closer to their house or a better fit for some part of their life. I think we had a couple people that retired earlier than they would have thought, maybe about 3 that I think, might have decided to transition that were a little later than we typically hear on retirements. So I would say within the norm of our overall experience. I do think that the hiring market is very competitive and people were getting recruited. That, I think, is a new trend that is a little different. I think people are getting called to apply for jobs and they're being courted to transition. So that, keeps us on our toes. We need to be a good place to work, both financially and experientially. We had a couple, I would say of all the transitions, we had a couple that were really regretful losses that I wish we could have held on to. But you have to be happy when people make a transition that works for them. And those were both leadership positions that I thought they really needed. So I'm really pleased with our hiring season. And we've hired people with as much as 22 years of experience. We've hired people that I said are new in the field, that are bright and capable and ready to go. So it's going to be a good year.
I'll also say, too, so we hired 42 professional staff, 40 teachers, and that's right around 10% of our total teacher population that we have, and that's very standard. District I came from, always around 10%, 10%. So if you're losing 20% of your staff, you have an issue, but 10% between resignations, and we had a good number of teachers retire, I don't think it was excessive.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I would like to comment on diversity and inclusion. So some people seem to think that DEI is just a feel-good type of policy. I beg to differ. So I came to know about this when I was reading about Steve Jobs. If you recall, Steve Jobs in his first go-around with Apple was a big-time failure. He had a board of advisors. So in his writings, he writes this. He had a board of advisors who looked just like him. And they were all smart people. It's not like they were dumb or anything. But he would get an idea, he would look at a problem, he would go to his board of advisors and he would say, this is what I think is the solution. And most of the times he would just get nods from them. Not because they were dumb, but because they saw the problem through the same lens that Steve Jobs saw the problem. So he couldn't get much, and he left Apple. And the second time when he came back, he writes, he made a conscious effort to have diverse people in his board of advisors, not just based on race, but also based on their education. He got liberal arts people, he got science people, he got math. So different race, collectively, all that was also included. So he had this diverse board of advisors, and this time when he went with a solution for a problem, he had various people come at him at different angles and tell him why it worked or why it didn't work, and come out with alternatives. That's what diversity brings to the table, not just feel good. So we want our kids to learn from different perspectives, not just from one. It could be the right one, but different perspective, and think differently of the same, and learn from different lenses. That's what we want our kids. That's what makes our kids well-grounded and well-rounded. That's what brings to the table. It's not feel good. It's not, it's not just to make somebody feel happy.
Right.
It's got real value. And companies are seeing it. Otherwise, companies wouldn't go spend a ton of money to bring diverse people into their organization. They won't do that. They know they're all for profits. They know there's a value to it. And we as a school district should recognize that there's a value to it. That's why we are trying to push this, not because of anything else.
I was actually really pleased with the amount of applicants that we received and the amount of hiring that we did from teachers and paraeducators from diverse backgrounds. I mean, do we have further to go? Yes, we do, but I was actually really pleased with the numbers, and I think we're moving in the right direction, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I think it's really good for our students to have a wide variety of people from all over the world that they're
We had some nice career change. It's a really nice field. We've done some very good hiring. We had some nice career changers, so people that have moved from being paraeducators into seeking their teaching license, who have a wide range of perspectives on the work because they've been to multiple buildings and in multiple classrooms, and just both experience in other districts and perspectives where districts come at different things differently. And then we have racial diversity, ethnic diversity, religious diversity, like all of the mix that keeps us just a really vibrant teaching faculty. And I think when people are interviewing, I think our interviewing skills have strengthened so that we have good teams of people that are really gaining perspectives. And I think we did really well out in the field this year. So of the people we brought on board, I feel like we're in a good place.
Yeah, the future of our country depends on the innovation. Innovation only happens when you look at a problem in several different ways. It doesn't happen when you look at a problem and just get fixated on one solution. We need our kids to get exposed on looking at a problem and thinking several different ways. That can only happen if the teachers are teaching them several different angles to the same issue. That's what. And we need to create more innovators. We are losing our ability to innovate and create new things and do wonderful things we used to do before. We are losing it.
I think Aritrika had a question.
I just had a logistical question, but I can attest the student body really appreciates having diversity within the staff, and it makes everyone feel better about education through getting different perspectives. Westborough as a student body is also very, very diverse compared to a lot of school districts, and I think that being translated in the staff as well is always a good thing. I had a logistical question in terms of when can we expect to see the updates of like the staff, their contact info, and their like pertaining role updated. I'm not sure if that's something that the school committee is responsible for to create a database for, if individual schools are, because I think as of now, they're not updated.
You mean on the school websites?
Which database?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not updated on the school websites yet. Just the list of staff and emails.
Yeah, that's
It still
usually
lists
the first week after they finish hiring, they roll them over.
Good question, though.
Yes, thank you.
I was like, I was like texting people like, who's the new person here?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your perspective and for the question. Anyone else from this side have any thoughts? I want to thank you for being here, and I felt like my questions were all answered just based on what you said, so thank you very much. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
For your work.
Yep, thank you for your work. Yeah,
Thank you.
hard work. So we are moving on to the enrollment update and sections. Is that Daniel? Is that you?
That would be me. This is just there's not a written report on this yet, in large part because enrollment's still a little bit in flux in terms of we have people who are still registering, and we also are trying to figure out at this time of year whether some people are indeed coming back. Though, I would say it's probably 97%, if not higher, settled. And it's about where we expected we would be. And the class sizes that we estimated we'd have, which were all going to be at very reasonable levels this year, that is indeed the case. So when you look across the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, the number of students is, like I said, where we thought it would be. The one school that got slightly more students than we anticipated, and it was probably on the order of like 15 to 20 students spread across Armstrong. And there's a second grade average class size is still very respectable, but higher than we thought, and it's at about 21 point something, depending on, I forget how many sections there are there. But we thought that second grade was going to be maybe at 19, but it's still within the parameters of what we consider to be an excellent student-teacher ratio. Other than that, I'm just, don't have anything written for you. I'm just giving you the general update. If you want something and you want to ask me specific questions, I'm happy to give it to you. All I can say is it's like a typical summer. There's a lot of people who walk into our office. Donna, who works right outside, she's my assistant. My office is constantly working and helping our families, and she greets them with a big smile, and people move here for a variety of reasons, whether it's work or they've gotten the word that Westborough is a wonderful place to be and they move from other surrounding districts. But it's a very busy place up on the third floor of Forbes during the summer.
So until we get students back, right now, I think the good news is that the sectioning is holding where we would have wanted it, and we built a little flexibility there for us because we wanted advantageously to maintain class sizes we thought were on the lower end of what we used to live with much more typically as where our class sizes stood, especially at the elementary level. But that we knew that if something happened with enrollment that was unanticipated, that we would be in a good place. I think the news is good. Until we get students through the door, there's also students that moved that we don't know until Donna's always cross-referencing. If she enrolls in a dress, she's cross-referencing if there was a student there to see if they should have unenrolled. And so, but all the coming and going, the October 1st report is the first time you should really look at the hard number and not get into rolling numbers that people see where they are looking at old copies of things. So I really wanted Daniel to provide a good verbal update tonight to reassure you that your sectioning, I think, is holding well. And we're coming into the school year with class sizes the way we would have wanted them. And we have hopefully, seen the vast majority of enrollments. And I hope we probably will pick up a few more students who might have moved that we don't know. So the October 1st report will bring it in. If something drastic happens in a way that changes that in the next week, of course, he would be pulling that forward for another report.
Okay, well, thank you. We look forward to seeing that October 1st report, and we can see how there's a lot of variable movement at the beginning of the year.
Hundreds of students coming and going a year. It's the same thing as the hiring. The volume is a much higher rotation than people realize. You know, we have hundreds of students coming and going throughout the year, so it's always very, very busy. Okay. I think I'm up next. Do you want me to go?
You are. Facilities Summer Project.
Yes, so I wanted to provide a brief overview for you to just highlight some of the projects. As Steve mentioned, we do, it's a very short, tight season where you can get in rooms and strip floor, change out tile, change out project things. You really have a very, very short window to do major projects. It means all the companies are competing at all the same time with all the same school districts to get in there and do project work in the summer. This gives you a picture of some of what went on this year. At the high school, we got the softball field project completed and finished it off. It's got the sprinkler system, it's got good plantings, it looks really good. The fences are in place and it's now at a stable finish. We relocated the principal's office back to the original design, which was that principal's office was on the second floor looking out right above the other. So kind of spreading out the admin team to be more accessible for multiple students and faculty to reach them. We did the softball sidewalk finish, looks really good. Fence repairs, football bleacher repairs and cleaning, tree trimming and removal. The football press box floor needed some repair. We did some boiler work on a leak. Tennis courts got refinished. If you take a look at them, I just want to call out on the tennis courts. I think this is probably the last go around you're going to get on those courts, where at a certain point, the repair to a court is you take up the concrete and you need to lay new concrete. That's a much more expensive and substantial project. I've asked for some kind of estimate on it at some point because it should flow into the capital strategic plan, because I think, you know, we'll get another couple of years, but those are heavily used courts.
How old are they?
They were put in, I think, at the original renovation in the 90s. And so they are, I mean, they've got the winter, you know, upheaval and weather. We take very, very good care of them. And they showcase well visually, but they definitely are breaking down. The guy who does the work on them does an excellent job to repair the cracks and to monitor them. But we've got a couple, you see an increase in dead spots over the time. You see some kind of little bit of inconsistency in the level surface. So the maintenance on those is beginning to increase some in terms of it just not holding up the way we want. So I'm just letting you know, I start to project forward on those. I certainly would put that in front of you more in the future in an organized way, but it's just a chance to note it to you. The gym floor got redone there. We rotated out and slowed on the other gym floor replacements. I've been talking with Bob about this. I don't think that the floor, every gym floor has to necessarily be stripped and rotated each summer. I've asked him to try to space them out so that the rotation shifts. Gibbons wood is very thin, and they do a sanding and then a refinishing, and I don't necessarily want to push the limit on that. So we're not refinishing Gibbons right now. It looks fine. We did the high school, which takes the most punishing amount of use. It looks really good. And then we'll space those out on a rotation. You've now added fails into that mix. So you've got a wood floor there that requires care. So you've got Mill Pond, fails, Gibbons, and the high school. And so, you know, the other two are the rubberized play surfaces at Armstrong and Hastings. So it just, you know, requires a little bit of spacing. And so another thing that, you know, I know, Steve, you're taking notes there on that, like, it needs to rotate a little more thoughtfully into the capital plan. We tend to do it as part of general maintenance. We have it carried in budget, and I'm just going to have him space that out and drop it in. But I feel good about what they got done. Armstrong projects, the playground is really the most major project ongoing. The grounds work over there was really the substantial project to be completed this summer. It required a lot of work on drainage and a lot of strategic collaboration with DPW and different people to get in there. John Fryer working, he works collaboratively in town and with DPW and contracted the job and did a really incredible job to really look at the plans, figure out what was down under the ground there, access clearing the drainage systems that had existed, leveling it appropriately, and then also with a good strong marking of the property lines, clear further back and do good tree trimming. So we actually picked up play surface, and that's a very contained site. So it is going to be a really spectacular finish over there when it's done and bring the quality of play space and outdoor area to a nice level. I'm very, very pleased with how that's looking. There's a delay on the order of the play equipment. I don't imagine that we will be placing that play equipment until April. John made the same transitional planned adaptations for playing in other spaces that Fales did last year. He communicated actively with his families and his faculty. I think he feels like they'll be playing on the upper field and the blacktop, and they've purchased a lot of, movable play equipment. I think that the students will be able to utilize that until we get the finalization in. Worth the wait. It's going to be a really nice play structure. The other things that were done there, the roof project, Steve already spoke about. I think that's gone very smoothly with Kelly's leadership, Dave's work, and Steve to kind of monitor that through the summer, as well as Bob's work. And we did some windowsill replacement, so good stuff over there. Gibbons, we did some boiler project work, and really a water bottle and filter placement project there. Should be minimum. That was the last building really renovated. You should see as small a list as possible there, true to form. Hastings, we continued with rotation of rooms where we're taking a chunk of rooms by the pods as they have them set up and putting down new floor tile and doing some cosmetic and maintenance work and painting in those spaces. That continued this year. We worked on some geothermal leak replacements, a bottle installation, and a garage lift so that they can take one of the snow maintenance vehicles in the truck and do work over there, change the oil and do stuff. Mill Pond, again, just major updates to different pieces that are kind of annual. Nothing too major there. The major project there was the LED light fixture, which came off of the grant program. I have to say, it looks like it went really, really smoothly. I think the sign-offs on that are complete and looked really good. I was over there and they were checking and signing off on it, I think, when we were doing the new teacher orientation. They did a repair on the scoreboard. Fails, you've heard about. We installed a panic button and security safety installation at the Sugar Shack. And that gives you kind of the big project highlights of things that we got done. So a very productive summer, and more to come. We have 6 large facilities that require a rotation of maintenance and good care. I would call out the fact that Bob and Kelly will start working with Dave on reviewing and rotating the capital plan projects to get them in the queue and lined up for discussion in the capital budget planning process. And Bob, I believe, has completed the draft of the RFP to go out so that we can do a new capital assessment, a new DRA report. I remember we talked about that, and he's getting ready. I think that's ready to post. I think Dave is reviewing it now. So good things about capital work and keeping the rotation of projects in as fiscally and organizationally planned as we can. So that's the report. Any questions on projects?
From the committee?
Busy. Good
Very
busy.
busy.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good update.
All right.
Okay, so we're moving right along. We are now on the financial update. And I
Thank
believe
you.
that is
Back
you
to
and
Dave and I. And Sherry Stevens is here with us tonight. So, so an overview of this. A reminder about the article that we submitted, and we gave you a heads up that I was going to be submitting that article based upon the encumbered tuitions coming into the year. I want to do, just to set the stage a little bit, kind of a 10,000-foot view tonight. Our goal tonight was really our opening warm-up meeting. And on the 7th, which is just, next week, I'd like to go more in depth on this, answer more in-depth questions. What I'd like to do is just give you an overview to reactivate your memory on all of the pieces. It's a lot to hold on to. So this is more like background for you, and to kind of take notes on the pieces you have and to then surface questions. And then that will allow Sherry and Dave and I to prepare kind of a more granular conversation, and any request for vote and action to shift this number or to do anything differently, I would request that we do on the 7th. Okay, so I'm hopeful to take a first pass now and remind you of all the pieces related to this, and then go more in depth next week. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so Dave has a terrible cough, and so I will take kind of overview on pieces, and he's going to hop in with me and step through it, okay? I'm going to start with the overview. You see this was the draft that we submitted, basically requesting $539,000. And again, I told you Dr. Sherry Stevens is here as well, so if there's tuition questions, she can help us. For the purpose of increasing the fiscal year budget. And I gave a little bit of article information indicating that between the submission of the budget in December, where we submitted the budget to the town, we had an outplacing of 8 students that occurred between January and the end of the year that required outplacement. And now coming into FY23, we budgeted in December, but we have a gap between the students that placed out that we didn't carry in that budget and funds available. I'm going to kind of step you through that, okay? So to think about it this way, I'm going to start by stepping you through it, and then you can hop in and help me, all right? Annually, we budget for the number of students and carry tuition for students in outplacement. So those are out-of-district tuition placements. We use budget monies, and we use circuit breaker to create the package of the monies to cover students that need to be placed out of district. Again, we have a very successful and robust special education program, and our goal and target is to develop the kinds of programs that allow us to always program our students in the community in which they are raised. That is our kind of philosophical framework. It's a very strong passion we have in this district, something we're deeply committed to. And I think of the 630 plus, how many? I almost had it. The 632 students on special education plans in the district, the very vast majority of those students, we have programming that is a good match for them. And then we have a small area where students need programming of a different type, and they place to out-of-district tuitions. You know, those are very expensive in many cases. So annually, we build the budget, and we always talk about that gap. I always do that slide that shows the circuit breaker, how much we got, how much we held in tuitions last year, and there's always the request for the gap. We did that last year against all of the known students that we had outplaced. But through the spring of last year, we had an escalation, and I provided some updates for you and let you know that Sherry was tracking about a $500,000 gap that she was looking at around students who were moving into outplacements that happened after the budget was voted and moved forward to the town. So typically, the next point of that is that annually, you know, we maintain when available, we are able to prepay 3 months of tuition. So whenever we build the budget at the close of the year, if there are funds available, we are allowed to take from the FY21 budget, if we have available funds, up to 3 months of prepay on the tuition that lets us basically carry a stabilization fund. We've always, for multiple years, in all of my years here, and Irene had in years before, maintained a structure of being able to have funding available that she could rotate forward into the allowing of that prepay. So she would prepay using closing budget funds of the year before, about allowable in the structure of how you can do this to delineate it, to basically create a stabilization fund. And that stabilization fund has always covered the ins and outs of the transitions of 1 or 2 students that outplaced during the year. And that is why you've never seen me visibly come forward and talk about a gap between students that have outplaced and needing to get additional budget funds. We've always maintained that stabilization or made other budget adjustments or cuts and have been able to manage a change in a para situation or a student that moves in and needs extra help or a student that places out using that stabilization fund. So at the close of last year through 22, we had these students placing out. We talked about the fact that we believe this is an anomaly based upon really the complexities of COVID and 2.5 years of students having very, very different learning experiences and programming that we weren't able to provide in some of the emotional arenas. Therefore, they went to tuition placements. By the close of the year, we used all of the prepay stabilization to cover those costs. And then, given that we had a lot of budget impacts, unanticipated, those and others, we talked about some of the issues we faced with plumbing and electrical because we didn't have the electrician. We had some increased costs in buildings and grounds. So we were able to close out fiscal 22. You have to close out in the black. We did. We closed out. But we have no prepay coming forward into FY23, and I provided that update, Dave and I, at the end of the year. So we're coming into this year with 8 students, basically encumbered tuition that we are not budgeted for, that are at that gap of about $539,000. And that's where I put the article in, and that was as of like August 15th when I needed to submit a placeholder. What I wanted to do now was actually pull up a table just to give you a little picture of some of that in large numbers, just so you can wrap your head around. It's a lot to take in verbally, so I thought I would give you kind of another modality, and I just wanted to open up
I shared it with you earlier.
the table, the one that he sent you. Sorry.
Thank you.
And I just kind of summarized what I've given you in a couple graphics that I want to kind of step through. So again, I think the big pieces for us to remember is we don't typically have this many students that we need to cope with. And typically we have been able to not have as many budget oh, that's too big. Why don't you small that down a little bit for me so I can look at the whole table? Thanks. Close, though. All right. So you see at the top there, I kind of built a synopsis for you. The 8 students at the top there that placed out during FY22 is the $539,000. Those are their tuitions. Those are encumbered and students that are outplaced. And that was a request that I submitted. Since then, I just want to hold up a couple pieces for you. And again, that's why I said we're going to go down into a much more granular level on this next week. I wanted to give you talking points and thinking points. We have a student who came in on August 1st, actually 8/15, that has a tuition cost to us of $89,800. That is not currently carried in that 539 number. The actual gap as of right now for actually encumbered tuitions is $628,833. There are a couple other pieces at play that we're currently reviewing. We have 2 settlement agreements that have happened. Those are at the end of kind of a trajectory of working with families around closure on differences in our plans and some of the thinking around what's best. And when you reach a settlement agreement, there's usually closure that you would cover one part of a tuition or maybe one more year. There's ways that we come to an agreement with a family that we can work forward from. We have 2 settlements that have just occurred, one at $91,700 and one at $41,000. Those are one-time payments. So sometimes we might be able to cover those, in a different way. Or we would let those ride through the close of the year and see if we would have other offsets, because it's a one-time payment. But I'm just showing you those numbers. We have 2 students, student 10 and 11, who are projected potential outplacements. Now, that might mean that they end up not placing out. It might mean that it takes many more months than we think to come to completion and actually get them on a list and get them transitioned, which can typically happen. But right now we're carrying those anticipated potential placements for those 2 students. So that's an additional $300,000 that play in terms of discussion. We need to do more work on students 10 and 11 and the settlement agreements, looking at budget, Sherry and Daniel and I together. So I'm showing those as kind of, ones that I'd like some more work on between now and the 7th. But I wanted to foreshadow those to you and let you kind of think about those. And then we would come back with some concrete proposals to you that would say, we'd like to discuss whether or not we need to raise the number that we would request in the budget warrant article. So that's as succinct an overview. It's very complex. I just want to give a shout out to the daily amount of work that Lisa Boyer and Sherry Stevens bring to tracking. The tuition work, the placements, the agreements, the settlements, the meetings, the transportation, all of the work that it takes on these cases is really involved. And there's always fluid transition. You might have a student move, you might have a student come back to district. So there is some financial leverage during the year that also often can give us checks and balances to make some cost offsets. And typically, those don't rotate in front of you because, like we always had the stabilization fund, we also then that coming and going would give us some leverage to manage those during the year. So you're kind of looking at a strange perfect storm where last year we had some maintenance costs where we had the plumbing backups across district, which ran over $100,000+. We had electrical stuff that had to be contracted out because we didn't have an electrician, another $100,000+. So you had like $250,000 hitting on the buildings and grounds side, which was completely out of the norm. And we're really hoping to see a dissipation in that now that hopefully people, so many of the PPE products and types of things that were like showing up in sewer systems that have clogged systems, we hope would have some return to some, more normalcy. And we've hired an electrician. So, there's 2 pieces there that we think will fall back into maintenance. And we certainly don't anticipate that we would face a year where we would see as many as 8 students like that. That's just an anomaly in my 9 years that we haven't seen. So, we're hoping that it really is, and sadly, we have to do what's right for every student, an anomaly of the stresses that families and students were placed under during COVID. So I guess I would open it up for general. I know it's a lot of information, but that's why I said I wanted to give you kind of the big umbrella, open it up for discussion, and the 3 of us can answer any questions, and that will help us to prepare for next week. Sorry, Raghu, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Steve, did you want to start us off?
Yeah. So the timing for this request is going to be what, the fall town meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And if I'm reading this correctly based on your presentation, is we have a shortfall of almost $1 million.
Potentially, yes.
On these numbers, okay. Now, it's my understanding that once the town puts the money on the table for this, that a good portion of this would be rebated to the town from the state in the following year. Is that correct?
So you're talking about circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker should go up. When we build the FY24 budget, the circuit breaker should go up against the additional number of students that go out, decreasing part of the ask. But you're in a gap for that until we see what that number is. Right.
To account for.
Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead.
I would just
sorry.
add additionally that usually the circuit breaker, we never know where it's going to land. It can fluctuate anywhere between 60 and 75% of the actual cost. So the governor's had some good news this year for us. I think for everybody to err on the side of caution, you would budget around 65% just in case.
now, I believe that comes into the school budget rather than to the return to
Right,
the
circuit
town.
breaker comes directly to our budget side, which is why it's the only number we carry when we build the budget structure, because it's the only one we can leverage within our actual budget planning.
But in reality, it's already encumbered. We will spend the money, and if we don't get a town meeting
That
vote,
gap, yes, no,
it will
that's a
come out of
great,
something else.
that's a great question. So that's a good clarifying feature. The gap of the 539 is with the application of circuit breaker applied already. So it's not like I'm requesting that we go back to town meeting and request that money, and I'm holding circuit breaker to apply against it at the close of the year. That is a request with circuit breaker already applied against the financial request. So for FY23, the budget year we're in, circuit breaker will be fully expended against our tuition costs, and we still have that gap. I mean, it's simply that you built a budget and then you had more kids go out and we had to pay for that. And it's the cost of those, it's literally the cost of those tuitions is the gap that carried all the way through the close of the year, which then is unfunded coming into implementation of 23 because we didn't budget for them.
So the point that I was trying to, I guess, structure is that we have to spend the money. It's an obligation of the school department to do it. And so if the town meeting doesn't grant this money, let's say to offset it, then the money will come out of the existing budget, and therefore something else will have to change and reduce other expenses, whatever that may be, staffing or otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's not a good position to be in, and as you've explained, in past years, we had a contingency fund, if you will, a stabilization fund to offset things that go bump in the night. And I think I've been on the school committee, which is probably a lot longer than anybody wants, but this is the first time that this has come up. So hopefully the discussion that we have with the rest of the town, the selectmen, the town manager, and the financial team across the street will be understanding of what the impact of this is, if the understanding of the fact that we have to pay this money isn't understood.
Thank you.
I'm confused. So I thought the difference that we seek 569.
The 539.
539. That's an excess of what we already budgeted for this year, right? That excess, because we had unanticipated 8 kids moving, and we need that excess.
Yes.
Because of that excess money, the circuit breaker money coming in from next year's, from the state, 60% to 75%, like David suggested, 60 to 70% of that will be covered by the state.
Yes.
That's not applied against that 539 for now.
So each year we are in fiscal, we knew when we built FY23, the year we just cracked the books on, when we opened FY23, we already knew what circuit breaker was. He can give you the exact number. And we built the budget knowing that money was there. FY24, which we haven't built yet, that number will come to us and we'll know what that is, and that will roll forward into next year. So the design and that might spring back a little and be larger, okay? But right now, for fiscal 23 that you're in, the circuit breaker number is known, it's in Munis, it's in the bank, and we still have that gap because the budget we built didn't carry for that many number of students.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions to Steve?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, but there is a possibility for the circuit breaker funds to go up the year after, meaning there is at least a chance at some rebate.
Well, it would just mean, it would mean a smaller increase request in '24, hopefully. I mean, every year, if you go back in your past budget presentations, I've never seen a year where there wasn't a gap, but some years it's smaller than others. So we always show existing tuition costs, budget from the year before, which is what you're always working off of, and you plug in the circuit breaker, and the gap is, you know, what you're projecting in tuitions for this year. So, you know, we've had a lot of stable behavior in that line item for a lot of years. We haven't actually increased the tuition budget a lot. We've done some of the offsetting as opposed to kind of growing the budget base. So.
Yeah, I would just add another, I think to clarify, so circuit breaker for the current year is 1.4 million approximately. For next year, based on the numbers and out of district and depending on the percentage that we get from the state, the actual amount is, let's use 70%, say it's 1.6 million. That is the actual number. There's not like a 1.6 million. So say the actual cost for out of district was 2 million. The 1.6 is the total number you get. It's not like you get 1.6 and then the town gives you another 400 to get to the 2 million. You're at the 1.6. So we have our general fund budget, which could be 2 million, the circuit breaker, which could be 1.6. So now you're at $3.6 million. That's your all-in sped budget. If your out of district costs, well, if your sped budget plus your out of district costs come up to 400,000, you have to figure out how to 4 million, I'm sorry, you have to figure out how to come up with that 400,000.
And you see us always transparently carry that number really visibly as the gap, is kind of what we've called it in the past, so people can understand it's the growth in the budget against the funds we have. And we try to, you know, keep it, circuit breaker is always a little mystifying to people because it's rotating, you know, ahead. And so, and there's a gap between when you get it to actually match the number of students you have. And even then, it doesn't cover all of it. It only covers the percentage the state gives you. And that's variable every year.
There is a, kind of not to get into the weeds, but it's important and we can talk about it a little, but we won't know for a long time. There is this part of circuit breaker called extra extraordinary relief, meaning that if you exceed a certain threshold from a out of district placement in a budget, they will actually give you more money than the 70% of your total circuit breaker. But we won't know that usually until it's so late into the process that I'm trying to think, I might not know that number until like January.
Sherry, when do they usually?
Usually we start hearing about that in February, you know, and again, it's within changes each year. So we definitely pay attention to that in terms of where we are with our tuition.
So again, there potentially is, you know, a good news story at this, meaning that we got an additional, outside of the 70, we hit 80% or 85% of the total circuit breaker amount. But we'll know what we know budget process time, and then hopefully get some good news come February.
And you just can't move forward. I'm not comfortable as superintendent moving forward through the year with that amount of encumbered, uncovered funding. And then, you know, you can't budget that way. You know, you have to have those costs, they're encumbered, covered. And I think the trick is for us to be thoughtful about, I sent that number forward knowing that we have some work to do and figure out what the appropriate request is. And we're going to look back at some history and trajectory of how the funding has moved back and forth so we can make an estimate like, okay, you know, the settlement agreements we can manage in-house. We really want to go in for just the encumbered cost of the 9th student right now. Like, we'll come back with a general proposal as well as options to discuss. Certainly, I wouldn't have, I don't think there's any way we would have anticipated this as a portion of what COVID kind of, you know, did in terms of some of our experiences with students. And again, we're hopeful that it's an anomaly of that breadth of experience. It certainly isn't played out in our history. As Steve said, he's been on this committee a long time, and this is the first time we've had to do this. I did do some research, and typically districts typically either carry a stabilization account that they work on with the town, where they set aside $1 million and they have it and they let it sit there in case they need it, or some districts, the superintendent annually goes in the fall for a budget correction based upon outplacements. So, while we've been very fortunate in the way that Sherry manages the department and the way that Irene and Dave together in their shared kind of ownership of it have been able to manage it. But, there's a lot here for us to unpack. So.
One other question. So in a typical year, how many out of district placements?
Maybe, 3, 4, like really they come and go. So, they trade a little bit more sometimes.
Rare for 8 for the number to be
That's a big, that's a big number.
Totally
Yeah.
love it.
Right. And sometimes they play out as differently, but.
But we have no options, right?
It's whatever it is,
Right.
it
We
is.
have to.
I feel like it's a weighty thing to put on you at your opening happy meeting. And I want to start by just saying, I wanted to take that 10,000-foot view. I think that we remain fiscally responsible in the way we work with this community, and we go with transparency and clarity. We try to explain where we are. We try to be good stewards of the work. Lisa Boyer, who tracks all of this and works very, very hard, is the same person who turns around and works very, very hard to return money to the free cash of, the Medicaid reimbursement. And she's done really good work this year. I think she returned like $300,000 in Medicaid reimbursements. We're trying to be good shepherds of what we can contribute to this larger piece. And so, more to come. I wanted to present it to you tonight and let you send me any, if you get away from there and you start thinking, you can send Dave and I, just CC us the questions, and Sherry or me, and I'll share it with her, and we'll be able to prepare, I think, again, more of a proposal that would be necessary at our next meeting.
One quick question. Is truly there's no option? We have to do all.
Truly. I would, because again, I think the other piece you have to think about is that there are fluid experiences that we have. Look at the change in it since I put the number in, right? So during the year, we make strategic cuts, moves, deferments. That's part of budget maintenance. That's just daily in this. There's a lot of variability in these big numbers. And so that's part of our routine. And we haven't even greeted kids yet, right? So we're going to have to manage that this year by making other cuts and transitions and types of things, to offset those as they hit us. So I would anticipate, but there's no way to absorb that number and then come into the start of the school year knowing that you probably have to manage some other transitions that you have unanticipated. So.
Okay. Well,
okay, that's
thank
it.
you.
There you go.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I'm feeling nauseous. I'm sorry. It's really impactful, and I'm feeling the weight of it. So, which is understandable. So we will hear more about it as time goes on, and we're going to move on to the busing update. I'm sorry that was my reaction. So we are off to a very good start with NRT. The routes were ready on August 12th, and they went out in an email to district families on August 15th, and changes are continually being made. And thank you to Cindy Crowley as she delves through those. NRT has been very responsive for those changes as well. I wanted to mention that we did have 2 drivers retire this year, and so we have no extra drivers, but we have a full fleet of drivers at this time. There was also our Westborough Public Schools District had a wonderful bus driver breakfast last Wednesday to welcome the drivers. Thank you to Jacob Martin, Food Services Director, for setting up a lovely spread for them, and there were welcome bags for our drivers. They did dry runs of the routes. They were completed 2 weeks ago, so they seem to be very ready. That was part of the NRT's new toolkit of getting them ready ahead of time so there'd be a smoother transition to the start of the year. Just to give you an idea, there is a full fleet of 27 large buses, 7 minibuses and vans. So there will be an additional 33 vehicles on the road doing 3 runs of service. As Kristen mentioned, that means more traffic. You should know there were 6 minibuses last year, and we are increasing one to alleviate one that was always late, that was specifically going to the high school, the Borough program, and the Early Childhood Center. And we also went from 24 large buses to 27 because of the change in demographics and capacity. So we now, instead of 24 large buses and 3 minibuses doing the regular routes, we now have 27 large buses. That was just a pivot. And if there's anyone who's looking to become a new driver for Westborough, that is always available. They have paid training. So if you're listening, you can contact NRT directly. Westbrook Public District has requested that the windows remain open on buses, weather permitting. Wanted to just put that out there. Drivers, similar to our district's policy, have an optional masking policy. And then I bet you're wondering, where's my kid app? When will that begin? Where's my kid bus app will begin on September 26th. This delay is to iron out kinks in the routes for the first few weeks prior. An email will go out prior to the app going live on how to sign on to and utilize the app. So keep an eye out for that email. And finally, there will be 2 late buses for athletics at the Westborough High School, beginning Wednesday, day 1, where there's a 5:30 pickup. So we're going to have a 2 bus, east-west, only the high school. And part of that is that our middle school football players will be going over to the high school, so they will have transportation home as well. And I also wanted to mention, I mentioned the large buses. As school committee members, there's no additional cost between a minibus and a large bus, which is important to note when it comes to budget. So those are the updates about busing. Any questions about our transportation?
So just to clarify, the buses, like last year, it went to Gibbons first and then dropped everyone off. So the late buses wouldn't do that anymore.
So there are continually going to be late buses right after school at the 3:15 of, I think it's not 3:15, 3:45 at the middle school. That is still going to happen. So there's 3 buses there, north, east, west, and central. But there will be 2 additional later buses at the high school at 5:30. So I wanted to let people know that. It's a great addition, and NRT was very responsive again for getting that up and running. So thank you to Dave, who's our transportation, really our director, and Cindy Crowley, and it's going to be a great year.
And where can families, if they still don't know their bus route, where could they find it?
They could find it on the website. It's actually one of the bullet points on each of the school websites. There are these little circles of different colors, and bus route, I think, is one of them.
They have the quick links set up
Quick
for each
links.
building. Yep.
Very nice. So if you happen to miss the email that showed your bus route, and there have been some changes, of course. They're trying to create efficiencies, but also to make it more conducive for buses that were going from one end of the town to the other end of town, so that there are kids less.
And it takes about the first week and a half, 2 weeks to really even out the pacing of the timing, and everybody knows to be patient, and then it comes into a really standard routine that you can really figure out by clockwork when they're going to come out. And if you don't even need the app, but the app's good to have to show you like when you need to be out there in the window of grabbing your bus. I encourage people to let their children take the bus. I think it limits traffic, it streamlines the day, it builds in routines, independence for students, and I think we have really, really nice drivers.
Yes, at the breakfast, I met many of our drivers, and they are so proud and so excited to see our kids back on the buses. They are very possessive of their group. They asked if there would be changes, and no, because they really get...
Yeah, they know their kids, which is nice.
Yeah, if they're kids, they're their kids, right? Okay, so we're moving on to acceptance of donations to the Borough program.
One second, excuse me.
Dave.
Yes, I would wanted to acknowledge the fact that we had 2 donations to the borough. I think you can see them right now. The first donation is for $10,000, and this will actually be for the purchase of some fudge making equipment at the borough, but also help with classroom supplies throughout the whole year. So obviously, the level of gratitude I can't fully state appropriately, but I want to say thank you, and I would advise the school committee to accept that donation. The second donation is actually from the same individual. That is for $373.50. And this is actually something pretty cool. This will be for the renting of a showcase cinema theater to have a end of the year field trip for the borough program. And I think, as you can imagine, the work and all the efforts and everything that happens at the borough, that these kids really deserve something like that. So it's very nice to have this kind of award at the end of the year. So again, I would encourage the school committee to approve these and accept these on the behalf of, I think, all of us. I think just because they're so great. Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we accept the 2 grants from Christine Simpson in the amount of $10,000 and $373.50.
Do we have a second?
And that we accept it with gratitude.
Oh, I don't know.
Second?
That's
Any
why I didn't
discussion?
say it.
I wanted to thank the donor. That is very generous. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And all in favor?
Aye.
See a motion of 5 in favor, 5 being present, so that motion passes. Accept the donations. Do we have a motion? Okay, first of all, the next regular session meeting of the school committee is scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
Yes, I vote that we meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, Administrators Union and Teachers Union, and under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to review and approve executive session minutes from May 31st, 2022, and June 8th, 2022.
Do we have a second? I declare that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the board's bargaining and negotiating positions. This meeting will not reconvene in an open session. Is there any discussion? Oh, that was my discussion. Sorry.
Roll call.
Okay, roll call vote. Steve?
Bachelor, aye.
Vincent, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Tourette, yes.
Okay, so that's a 5-0 vote, 5 being present. We are now in executive session. I invite everyone to now